So this is a combination of Intro to Computer Science and Engineering 1, I believe. Okay, and Mr. Reno, we're all familiar with having guest speakers. We had some last semester. I wasn't here during most of them. I was out on paternity leave with my baby, but it's also be exciting.
Congratulations.
Thanks. So yeah, I'm excited to hear your talk. And so just a quick reminder with guest speakers, you can take headphones off. And make sure all computers stay closed and cell phones stay away. That'd be great. Anything else? Okay. After we have a couple more people. Actually, can I have a couple people move up to the seats that are open? We have just so we can fill all the seats up. Hey, how's it going?
And figures that are sitting behind people, move your chair so you can see there's like lots of space in the
Got it.
aisle.
I guarantee I'm going to ask a question to the person sitting in this chair.
Slide over. You can see her. You can see Sasha.
You have your
Okay.
phone. Your mom wants to talk to you. Or does she have the phone in the office? When? Now? Yeah, okay. I will have him call. Okay, Matt, go to the office and call your mom. Okay, thank you.
Bye, Matt.
You're in trouble. I don't know why. Yeah.
Just happens, not you.
Right. All right, there we go.
All right, very good. Good morning.
Oh, wait.
My name's John Reno, and here's a couple ways to contact me, communicate with me if you have questions afterward. I'm going to talk about my journey through technology and some some ideas for you to take the skills that you're starting with and engage and learn. And I'd encourage you to ask questions if something pops into your mind while I'm in the midst of my talk. That's fine too. And we have some time after the 15 or 20 minutes of talking about my perspective to go into your specific questions. But feel free to ask questions anytime. So let me begin. Has anybody had any experience working with this guy? It's a Raspberry Pi computer and network development environment. It runs Linux, so it may be similar to environments that you've worked on, kind of in a desktop environment. But this is sort of most applicable kind of at the end of my journey here, where I'm working in the Internet of Things. But from your point of view, it's often given out free by companies. When I was working at Cisco in Silver Spring, we gave these away because we wanted to create code and applications that would run on this that would then easily be extended to this distributed computer environment that we were creating with the Internet of Things. So let me pass that around, and you can just sort of have a look at that. And let me get into the sort of part of my presentation that tracks my journey. And when I was thinking about this over the last week or so, I kind of went back to where my mind was at as an elementary, middle school, high school student. One of the inspirations that I found early on was from these kind of like adventure, scientific or science fiction type books. And one of my favorites was A Journey to the Center of the Earth by Jules Verne. And that was written a long time ago. But from capturing the imagination, I thought it was a pretty fun adventure. And so this sort of formed the analogy for my journey over the last 25 years through technology. And I started out right out of electrical engineering at UC Davis, working at the core. And what I mean by that is with semiconductor chips. In this case, a processor or CPU. It was called the MIPS R4000. So basically, substantially similar, but at that time faster than the Intel chips that are common on our notebooks and desktop computers. And this eventually found its way, into the Sony PlayStation gaming systems, networking systems, even the automobiles that we drive to form kind of the heart of the processing that goes on within cars. And so that was applying the fundamental principles that I had learned at school in the real world, in the shape of a chip. As I moved forward, one of the next companies I worked with was in digital video. And so, today we think nothing of dialing up Netflix here and watching a movie on our phone. That was rocket science back in 1993. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that, but the journey to make digital video possible was a hard one and involved like core innovation and algorithms and implementation at a system level. I worked for Sun, which was a big computer company, got experience at the broader system level. I moved on to security. By now, communications across the internet was pervasive, so the need to protect data, protect privacy, protect our communications became essential, and it's an ongoing problem, believe me. I mean, it's in the news all the time today. And then over the last 5-6 years, I've been working in the Internet of Things. And so this applies the principles of connectivity of the internet beyond simply the people to people and people to computer communications that are kind of a common part of our daily lives. So now that's all about connecting our homes, connecting our factories, our businesses, so that we use energy more wisely, so that we can manufacture goods more effectively, and have safer, more productive cities, for example. And so that's kind of like a sketch of some of the things that I've done. Early on, and I want to share some of the experiences just to kind of give you a picture of what turned me on along the way. I was working at my first company. It was called LSI Logic. This was the chip company, and I had the opportunity to work with McLaren, and their game was racing Formula One race cars, on the Grand Prix circuit, and so the chips that we were working with them on controlled the suspension, controlled the engine, and the aerodynamics that kept the car in control and rooted to the ground. And so I found that pretty exciting, just kind of from a visual point of view. But one of the things that was even more interesting to me was what was going on beyond the driver and the car that was visible on the track. But behind the scenes, what I eventually learned was there was a whole host of folks that were scientists and engineers and technicians and pit crew, working as a really well-oiled team to help win that race, but then incorporate that learning and that information and tuning the car for the next race that was going to happen over the week, 2 weeks down the road. And so what my takeaway for that was I'm not working in isolation trying to just produce the best quality output I can. I myself am working with a team of salespeople, product managers, other engineers, and so that really was a way for me to understand that my role was to not only do quality work but help make the broader team successful, and that was an important lesson that I applied over and over and over again. And then sort of another interesting experience with digital video, and here I was at a company called C-Cube Microsystems, and we were working on the algorithms and the systems to encode, take the raw input turn it into a digital form, compress it, and get it into a form factor at that time that could fit onto a CD. And so, that was gonna, allow 500 channels on TV, that was gonna make for, movies on CDs, and ultimately play, from memory or stream from your phone. What was interesting was, you never know exactly how it's gonna turn out. And so just because of the nature of the algorithms, it was much harder to do the encoding than the decoding. And so we got the decoding side of it done first, and we were looking for, a production market to, fuel the tens and hundreds of millions of dollars in investment that was gonna make the encoding possible. It turned out that the first market that really drove volume, that kind of funded this business, was karaoke in Tokyo and Seoul and Bangkok, and we never could have predicted that, but that's what created the feedback cycle, to make the rest of the business work. So, I think the lesson there is you got to be open-minded. And then more recently, one of the interesting experiences I've had is working on these, very large-scale deployments of the Internet of Things. And so, for me, that started at a company called Silver Spring Networks with the smart grid. And so, rather than thousands of computers, we were deploying the networks, the wireless networks, and essentially computers in these endpoints that measured energy consumption and made the grid work more reliably and cost effectively. And so that was on the scale of hundreds of millions of compute endpoints out there distributed in the environment. And then one of the sort of extensions of that was into deployments within cities, what we called smart cities. And so this was an example of the city of Paris, which was one of the early projects that I worked on. And it was a matter of deploying the networks, the wireless networks that would provide connectivity in this environment, the sensors that would sense the traffic, the pedestrian movements, the state of the street lights, whether garbage needed to be collected or not, and then the compute and the data that allowed decisions to be made and the city to run more effectively for its citizens, the government, the stakeholders in that environment. So that's an application that's happening today, like here in Palo Alto, up in San Francisco. So those same sort of principles are actively in action. And then one thing I want to sort of impart is that it's never a linear path, and you don't go from just writing code to writing code on a more exciting project. There's always decisions and forks in the road along the way. When I was at UC Davis doing my double E degree, it was very much theoretical and learned a lot, but hadn't yet applied it in the real world. And what I was doing in the summer was teaching windsurfing to pay for tuition and books and residency in the dorms. And I had the opportunity to, my senior year, move to Oahu and work at Windsurfing Hawaii, and that looked like really cool to me. About 2 weeks later, I got a call from IBM and had the opportunity to work for 6 months, hands-on, doing development down in San Jose, which was kind of like the big Google-like company at the time. And so that was a hard one. Sort of like short-term fun versus can I actually apply this academic work that I've been doing in the real world, and will I like it, because I'm going to be doing it for the next 20 or 30 years. And so ultimately I chose to go work at IBM and take that experience to see if it was really going to be the right thing for me. And it turned out it was. The path still didn't go linear and predictable, but nevertheless, it allowed me to, make one of those decisions, many more of which would come further as I progressed through my journey. And then 5 years later, I had worked at a company called LSI Logic, doing chips, like that CPU that I showed you before. And I had kind of a break in that pattern and the opportunity to go skiing in Chamonix, which I always wanted to do. It's kind of like one of my core passions. And then travel more broadly around Europe and the rest of the world and kind of get a better sense on the ground of the culture and what people were thinking. And so I did that. When I came back a year later, I had the opportunity to go back to that current company, and it was a familiar, comfortable environment. Business was thriving, or join a 15, 20 person startup doing software, which I hadn't done before in a direct way. And I chose the startup path because I really respected the people. They were upfront with me about the risk, and it was a tough road. There were times when we really didn't think we were going to make it, but ultimately, we were successful. It's become a very large, thriving company, actually even today. So in hindsight, it was a good decision, but it was a matter of listening to others, making trade-offs, and then just moving forward at that time. And then so what's next? I mean, I've done a lot of work in technology and business and marketing. One of the things that I'm involved with currently is a nonprofit initiative on the west side of Kauai, and it's based around what used to be driven by the sugar industry. That ended about 25 years ago when the market for commodity sugar basically evaporated, and so this initiative is about revitalizing this community on the west side of Kauai with small-scale manufacturing, small-scale agriculture, and creating opportunity for the people to build some businesses, build some farms, and again kind of injecting some vibrancy and economic and social opportunity back into that community. And so that's one way for me to feel like I'm making a difference. And then I wanted to sort of share some opportunities for you, and there's lots of them. I'm very grateful to live in this environment, so I just picked a couple to kind of spark your imagination. One is just down the road here at Stanford, and there's all kinds of things going on there. One that I've been familiar with is the Technology Ventures program. And it's the core is set up for college students who want to be entrepreneurs, but they have a variety of programs that are oriented towards high school students. And it's the kind of thing that, hey, you've got a passion for machine learning, go hear a talk, go listen to an entrepreneur who's getting a company off the ground in that space. And it's a good way of kind of just showing up and getting exposed to the real world. Similarly, there's things like Meetup. This is an app on your phone or on your computer. This happens to be mine, and I'm in a few groups here. But what I wanted to get across was that just in my world, there's like 6,000 meetups that are happening in the near term, and these are groups of kind of like-minded folks that want to talk about networking or a new computer language or security. And so if you've got a passion and you've got an interest, use the power that we have here, and go after it. Show up, ask questions, learn whether that's the right thing for you or not. And then finally, I'll end on some prescriptive guidance that's worked for me, and I would encourage you to read broadly. And not be, sort of too constrained by, math, science, engineering, coding, and take that, you know, sort of attitude of curiosity. And you know, here we're just like a sampling of some of the works that were influential for me. When I was at UC Davis, there was a fellow named Gary Snyder, a professor there in the English department. Now, I didn't take any English classes, right? I was doing, you know, calculus and thermodynamics and things like that. But I had the opportunity to see him speak and learn a little bit about his philosophy on the environment and the community, and that's shaped my thinking over the years. Another one I picked out was Marcus Aurelius, way back from the Roman Empire, and then a fellow who taught at Stanford for many years and set up their creative writing program called, named Wallace Stegner. So, you know, what I'm trying to get across here is try to have a broad perspective, maintain a sense of curiosity, and just, you know, go out and engage this opportunity that we have around us. So that's what I have for you, and let me see what kind of questions you guys have. Happy to answer anything that's on your mind. Sure.
Do you think because living here we're born with a bunch of advantages that people from like small towns or something like that don't have?
Yeah, I do, and I've heard a couple of different takes on that. I've always grown up in the Bay Area, first in Richmond and the East Bay, and then, you know, worked here in the Valley. So I think, you know, just the access and the physical proximity, you know, is an advantage that's fantastic. I think that I personally have kind of taken that for granted sometimes, and I met a fellow who's at Stanford now. I kind of like served as a mentor for him, but he was from Indiana. He had never seen the ocean, and you know, when he came out here, you know, his sort of ability to engage and just take chances, you know, he was a sponge ready to soak things up, right? So I think it's kind of a double-edged sword, right? Because there's so much, we get a little jaded and take it for granted, or we might do that. Whereas, you know, people who you know, are, you know, in north of Canada, or, you know, from Peru or something like that, you know, just are so willing to take advantage when they do get here. Who else has got a question?
What was your thought process from like leaving, I guess you could say, like a stable job with the windsurfing to like gambling with IBM?
Well, yeah, so I you know, I mean, I think in hindsight, you know, I knew windsurfing was fun and interesting, but, you know, I also knew that I had colleagues that, you know, were 35 years old, and they teach skiing in the winter and windsurfing in the summer, and it was still, you know, a very kind of hand-to-mouth existence, and so I mean, I knew the right answer was go to IBM and find out, you know, whether the tech world was going to be for me, and so I mean, IBM at that time was also a very safe environment, right? It's like going to Google today, right? They're not going to go out of business, and it was a great place to get started. So, you know, I think that from where you're at, you know, as you take internships, you know, there's nothing wrong with joining, you know, an 8-10 person startup, but they can be pretty quirky and pretty unpredictable, right? So just go in knowing that. If you go into, you know, a program like Cisco or Intel or Google, it's going to be very structured. You're going to have a, you know, a narrow set of things to work on, but, you know, you're going to have a job for that 3 months or 6 months or, you know, year sort of program, and you know, there will be other people like you who are similarly doing, you know, internships or summer jobs, you know, so that's just kind of the perspective on it. Sure.
What was UC Davis like?
I loved it, and I I was here in the Bay Area, and it was Stanford, Berkeley, or UC Davis, you know, and Stanford was too expensive. Just there was no way my parents could afford it, or I could afford it. Berkeley, I felt like it was just too close to home. I almost felt like it was an extension of, you know, sort of the same folks that I had gone to high school with. And Davis was a good mix because, you know, it felt like a, you know, very strong academically, but it also felt like, you know, everybody was on campus, you know, with a focus of you know, getting their degree and, you know, having fun at the same time. Whereas, you know, I visit some friends in UCLA, and a lot of people would go home on the weekend. You know, it was kind of like a little bit of a commuter feel. So I really like that idea of, like, you know, there's farmland around, right? So there's not, you know, there's not kind of like the cool club scene in San Francisco. You got to create your own fun. You got to create your own passion for, you know, both the academics and the, you know, kind of broader experience. And the other thing that I found really helpful was that I did not get kind of pigeonholed into being like, I played rugby. And so, you know, at Berkeley, if you were a rugby player, you were a rugby player, right? You couldn't move between the engineering worlds and the social worlds. It was like you were kind of typecast. At least that's what I felt at the time. And so I felt Davis was much more open to having, you know, kind of many facets of you know, in my case, my identity. What else is on your minds? What you're gonna have at break?
Are you still windsurfing?
You know, I transitioned just recently. I sailed for you know, about 10 years beyond college, and then, you know, just kind of like keeping up with the equipment just became, you know, overwhelming, and so I had left it aside for quite a while, but just 2 years ago I got into kiteboarding, and it's kind of the same principles, but the advantage is that you know, pack up your kite and the smaller board, and you can, you know, sort of take it with you a lot more flexibly. So that's I'm not good at it, but, you know, that's kind of the fun endeavor at the moment.
Yeah, I don't think I would want to try that.
What exactly were you coding on the windsurfing? Like, what were you doing with the windsurfing?
Oh, well, so no, I mean, I was literally teaching people to windsurf, right? So it involved very little. There was no coding involved at all. There was physics, right? So vector analysis is sort of fundamental to understanding how it works. So that did come into play in trying to communicate, you know, how this thing operated. But no, it was you know, just out there, you know, on the water, teaching people to windsurf. I did draw a lot on those lessons in terms of, you know, communicating and understanding, you know, where people's heads are at, you know, as I got further into my tech career. But interestingly, at the same time, there were, you know, there was this kind of vibrant community in Berkeley that was, you know, being very innovative with the technology, the hydrodynamics and the wing characteristics of the sail. So it was very early on in the sport, and this little community around Berkeley, you know, infused by, you know, sort of the vibe here, was doing a lot of innovation in the board design. Boards were getting shorter, lighter, more maneuverable, faster, and the wing design of the sail. So, you know, you fast forward 25 years, and kind of some of the outcomes you saw when they had the America's Cup race here in 2013, right, where you see these catamarans, these AC-72s, foiling, right? And so, you know, now it's common, if you just go up to Coyote Point, you see people out foiling on their kiteboards. But, you know, we were very early on with that. But, you know, it's really interesting to see, you know, kind of the technology of sports and you know, where it fits in with the real world. And that Raspberry Pi that I passed around, you know, that's, this is, you know, probably one of the more common environments. It runs Linux, right? So, you know, you have a Linux environment there, you can, you know, put it on here and execute it. And, you know, this form factor wouldn't fit into the whole windsurfer, but you could easily, you know, set up a form factor that would. So.
Anybody?
Last chance.
Great.
All right, well, thank you. Enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.